Cloudcast Media. Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. And I am so pleased to have back in the studio, it's been a while, a return appearance from Mark Cafferty. He's president and CEO of the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation, literally one of the most nationally recognized EDCs in the country. And certainly you and your phenomenal staff has contributed to that. Well, good to see you, Mark.
Great to see you as well, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, joined by my co-host, Kristen Fogel. She's the executive director of San Diego Writers, Inc., celebrating their 20th anniversary in Liberty Station this year. And Kristen, I know Mark's been on the show before when we used to do it at the Union Tribune.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, you came on when Deborah Rosen was running San Diego North. I'm trying to get my Rolodex in there.
That's right.
And we're talking about jobs in the military and everything.
I think you had SDMAC and some of the folks, some of our military leaders that time. Yeah,
exactly. And I still go to all the SDMAC events. There's one next week on this. But Kristen, I know you have a question for Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Just for anyone who doesn't know, what is the mission of the EDC?
You know, our mission is really focused on maximizing the economic prosperity and global competitiveness of the region and kind of breaking those two things out. Economic prosperity is really our focus on people, just really trying to make sure that the folks who live in our community have an opportunity to live and thrive in this economy.
Yeah.
To do that, the global competitiveness is a piece that a lot of the business community over the years, through the full legacy of EDC for probably 6 decades now, folks have really wanted to try to accelerate and amplify San Diego's global image, and that's a fun part of what we get to do, and really see, doing both pieces the right way is what really leads to a world-class economy.
Yeah, they just, they're so ingrained in so many different things. And one of the things I love that you talk about quite a bit, Mark, and I saw Mark recently at a junior achievement board meeting, did a great presentation, by the way, no surprise on that one, is the connectivity to the schools and the students. And if you'll say this a lot better than I will, but the idea is, yes, we love our local schools. We just want to keep the students here, right? Talk about that.
Yeah. Drew, that is newer for EDC.
Right.
So, really for the past 15 years, but I'd say more heavily the past 7 or 8 years, our emphasis, what we really started to realize was the currency of our economy and any great economy is people. And once you get people realizing that the talent and the people are what either makes a company thrive here, makes an industry grow, you start to think of strategies of how to find them and keep them. And for a long time, the thought was, how do we get the best and brightest from elsewhere? How do you continue to bring really smart people into the region? And that only gets you so far. And I think we've seen that firsthand in our economy, as have other economies around the nation and around the world. The greatest economies understand that the young people growing up in this community, the folks whose families have invested in this community, the people who found their way to this community, sometimes with nothing at all, are the ones who are going to work the hardest to stay in this community and support this community. So I think we're finally at a place where the nexus of what's been happening in K-12 education, what's been happening in community colleges, 4-year universities, and what the business community needs is really coming together around not just the current jobs and the jobs of the future, but how to make sure the young people in our region have the training, the opportunity, and the connections to really make it in that economy.
That is just so spot on. So how are you coalescing all those groups? The 4-year schools, the community colleges, which are stellar, obviously, in our region, the K-12 folks, the private schools and all that.
Yeah. It's probably one of the gifts of EDC to me. So I've been in this role for 12 years.
Right.
And when our organization was founded, when we look back at the original paperwork, Saul Price was the chair, and through the years, Malin Burnham and Debbie Reed, and you name it, just names that are so synonymous with the growth of San Diego's economy and the strength of our community have helped lead the organization. So when you fast forward to the last decade, it gives you a lot of power to bring a lot of businesses together around the table. What's been newer for us, and we always had universities, we always had the bigger universities.
Yes.
What's been newer for us is we now have as many community college presidents on our board as we do university presidents. And we have junior achievement in the YMCA on our board and nonprofit organizations who have long served the Latino community, the South Bay community, the East County community, sitting side by side with those CEOs. What many of the folks in the education community and in the nonprofits will tell us is they've been doing this work for a long time, really waiting for businesses to engage more readily. And we have the ability to be the partner that does that. So we don't try to pretend to be a service provider. We don't try to pretend to be an educator. Our thought is if education's the backbone of the economy, and if that's what's going to make our community strong and thrive, we're the group that should be able to bring businesses to the table and make sure that the educators know that those partnerships exist and that those opportunities exist.
Yeah, absolutely. We're chatting with Mark Cafferty. He's the president and CEO of San Diego Regional EDC. I'm Drew Schlosberg. Cloudcast Media, listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We are the nation's longest running community podcast, now in our 18th year, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. And as Mark well knows, and certainly my co-host Kristen Fogel, Mission Fed for 60 plus years does so many great things in our community, whether it's from food insecurity, from literacy to art, and everything in between. And I know there's something that they love being affiliated with what you folks do as well on this. Kristen, have you ever done any work with the EDC at all?
I haven't. No. Yeah. I'm rapidly familiarizing myself at this current time.
Well, the touch points are huge on this, and I've always been impressed. Whoever's in the catbird seat, and of course, Mark's done a great job. They'll be celebrating their 60th anniversary next year, which is pretty cool in this area. And what I love about it, and Mark comes from a long storied career, workforce partnership, and his DNA was built to run the EDC. This whatever. Now he's turning red, and he said, "Drew, I'm never coming on your show again," and I don't blame you. No, but in all seriousness, and I think with this push here, and we just had Dr. Ashante Hands on the show, and is she on your board as well?
Not on our board, but know her well. Yeah.
Yeah. She's amazing.
She's amazing.
She is absolutely amazing.
She's great. She's great in that area. So talk about your inclusive growth goals.
Yeah. So, historically, an economic development corporation might be seen as a collection of big businesses focused on goals of big businesses. And, guilty as charged, that is a lot of the history of the EDC. And that grows economies. But, the reality is we were probably formed like most EDCs with a belief that the job of someone like me was to go to another part of the country and convince a business leader in Cleveland to move to San Diego. And unless there's a real reason to be in San Diego, that's just not really how jobs grow. And across the country, it just doesn't lead to any sort of net gain. By investing in the companies that are already there, all of our job growth comes from small and medium-sized companies growing. And so the first thing you've got to acknowledge is that we're mostly small businesses. Mm-hmm. And so the programs, even if they're funded by the large businesses, have to be geared towards small businesses. And increasingly these days, what we want to do is help those small businesses create more quality jobs that will keep employees there so that they don't train them and then lose them to our bigger companies. And then also, put the employees in a place where they can not only thrive with the company, but possibly spin out their own company. So possibly get into the entrepreneurial spirit that San Diego has so heavily been built on. So the quality jobs goal is a really important one for us. Between now and 2030, really trying to create 50,000 new quality jobs, defined as paying more than a living wage and allowing someone to have the benefits and the career trajectory that they need to make it, and emphasizing focus on the portions of our community that have been most disconnected historically from job opportunities. The second part of that, really the first part of that, is training more workers for the jobs that are being created, and really doing that through the community colleges and doing that through the higher education partners in all of our community. And our hope is if you do those two things well, it leads to more thriving households in the region, and that really is our ultimate goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, with Classroom of the Future Foundation, we talked about our soup tank event that's coming up, and we appreciate you folks taking a look at it. And we do work pretty closely with JA as well in this area. You can't talk about jobs to kids young enough. I mean, you need to talk about them in TK for that matter, an aspect of it, and just get them into the vibe of, this is what jobs are about. They will evolve. The job we're talking about now may not be around. You guys are so keen on working with groups like the Workforce Partnership and every other think tank type of things on about, and this is fine, but you know what, in 5 years, not quite sure if that's where the jobs are going. Talk about that.
No, that's probably the most important part of the strategy. So a big part of what we've built at EDC internally is we're a small team. So there's 25 of us. Sometimes people think we're a lot bigger. We've got about 150 to 170 investors. And on the team are 4 full-time people who focus on research. And so their job day in and day out is to make sure that if you all need research, data, demographic information, we get it for you. And we don't charge for that. We really try to make sure it's available to everyone. The second part of their job is to really think each year, are there particular segments of the economy or are there particular elements of what's happening in the economy that we should dive deeper into and study and put a study out so that people can kind of see and know. And probably the best example of that historically has been what SDMAC has done with their military impact report, the economic impact report for the military. The third thing these days that becomes more important is if we just put that data out and the right people don't see it or use it, so what? So we're really trying to create tools that, not only can researchers use them, people who want to, work with and manipulate data for a living, but policymakers could use them, staffers could use them, educators could use them, parents could use them to really, and young people could use them because they're more tech savvy than all of us, to really start to figure out how to think about the trajectory that's going to lead them to, not only where they'll be successful, but hopefully in something that they love doing.
Right, exactly. Mark, when we come back from break, we want to talk a little bit more about that as well. We want to talk about the trade mission aspect as well. And I know Kristen has some questions for you. And then we always save time in the second half of our interview. You may remember from the last time you were on, the last couple of times you're on, what can our listeners do to support the amazing work you're doing as we return with Mark Cafferty, President and CEO of the San Diego Regional EDC. I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. Been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We're brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union. We will be right back.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show. We're brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, broadcasting from those really cool Mission Fed studios here in Scripps Ranch. Mission Fed for 6 decades, just doing great things for people living in San Diego County. Honored to have back in the studio after a little bit of a hiatus is Mark Cafferty, President and CEO of the San Diego Regional EDC, joined by my co-host, Kristen Fogel, Executive Director of San Diego Writers, Inc. They're celebrating their 20th anniversary in Liberty Station. Kristen.
Yeah. So as you had so well teed up before break, let's get into the trade mission.
Absolutely. Actually, I want to first say,
sure,
I'm celebrating my 20th year in Liberty Station as well.
Oh, really?
My family and I moved, my wife and I moved in there 20 years ago.
Oh, cool.
You were a trailblazer.
We were the very earliest
Yeah.
round. My wife was a Navy physician in those days. Sort of heard, we knew of NTC, and we wound up down there very early on. And luckily, we've been able to raise our sons over there.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Beautiful
It's a great area.
Amazing community. And we're right near the airport, and that's a good segue into the trade mission. So
Sure.
I don't know that everyone in San Diego knows, that we do have a World Trade Center in San Diego. We've long had a World Trade Center. It functioned for many years as a little bit like a chamber-type organization for international businesses. They would come together and network. Back in the day, they would learn about a particular market. In other parts of the world, back before we could look at our phones and just kind of, learn about places instantaneously. And through different iterations, it had started to get to a point where after some leadership left, it was going to go away. And we were approached by the airport in the city, who are the license holders of the World Trade Center in San Diego, about 9 or 10 years ago, to take some work that we had done around imports and exports for San Diego and see if we could create a trade plan and then lead that trade plan under the umbrella of the World Trade Center. So they would continue to pay for the license. We at EDC would help to then staff that and sort of leverage the businesses that we work with. And so fast forward to today, that team is an amazing, small but mighty team within EDC, still working for the airport in the city on a series of goals every year that are international in nature. And the most specific of them is attempts to recruit more direct flights to our market. So the Japan Airlines flight, the British Airways flight, just the flights that really connect us to important hubs around the world. But part of what they all envisioned was San Diego traveling together to important markets around the world and really presenting sort of this world-class presence. So not finding out that Qualcomm had traveled to Korea, 1 month, and then a month later our airport was there, and then a few months later our port was there, and we don't even look like the same San Diego. But if we could be there with public and private leadership together, really research the markets that matter the most to us, have real transactional work that we can do in those markets. The amazing thing about a trade mission is when you come back, you keep seeing the results for years that follow. You keep making announcements and you can trace them back to the trade mission. So we are heading to Singapore at the end of September, early October. Congressman Peters will be sort of the anchor public leader, the heads of the airport, port, other key public partners, and then flanked by Qualcomm, Illumina, Cubic, big San Diego companies, and then a series of small companies that are trying to break into that market or trying to engage in the market. And really, really important anchor partner, as well as now we actually travel with the universities. And so SDSU and UCSD will be there with us with a very strong presence, really showcasing a lot of what folks in the Singapore market may want to invest in and know about through our universities in San Diego.
And why Singapore?
So, it's interesting. Each year we just try to poll places. We try to poll people in San Diego about the places where we have sort of a combination of things. We have some connectivity with that market already, and we can grow that. We're hearing from people that they'd like to learn more about that market. And Singapore, geopolitically and economically, for a long time has been an important player. Now more than ever, as Asia becomes a bit more complicated for people.
Right.
And in having our congressman with us is great because a lot of their questions are federal in nature, and nobody weaves together sort of the federal policy and the local focus like Scott.
He's great.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and he's just been such a great champion of the economy. But Singapore, every year when we have a short list, Singapore was always on it. I actually thought we set out this year to head back to Europe, and then we wound up going to Singapore. So it just seemed like all roads led there. And with Singapore and Malaysia being the cross-border economy that they are, it's actually allowing us to have a great contingent from Tijuana traveling with us because we're going to see the only border in the world that's actually busier economically than ours.
Interesting. So two things. I want to talk about our border. As I was involved with Mary Walshock and Chuck Nathanson and San Diego Dialogue, bless his heart, for quite a while. And Mary's still around doing.
We work out of the same building. I see her all the time.
I know you.
Yeah,
I know.
amazing.
I know you do. And she's something literally a national icon for that matter. But we know this region, the San Diego Tijuana region, is fruitful. But correct me if I'm wrong, and not that it's short of effort by folks. But shouldn't we be getting a lot more economy from that region? Or, and it's not to point fingers at anybody, but it could be a very rich region.
Oh, no doubt. Economically speaking, it's actually been my favorite thing about this job and really one of my favorite things about moving to San Diego. Coming from Boston, I had no idea what a cross-border culture really felt like. Boston is a diverse city, but when someone comes from somewhere else, it's from far away. And in the moment I arrived in San Diego, I had colleagues who had literally grown up, lived, been educated on both sides of the border. And I just found it amazing because I just didn't have that sense from afar. People still don't have that sense from afar. But the amazing thing from the first time I was a guest in an EDC board meeting was watching business leaders that you've been so close with over the years,
Right.
Drew,
Right.
cutting people off in the middle of a meeting and saying, when you're speaking about the region, speak about the whole region.
Exactly.
Don't speak about the 3 million of us on this side of the border. Speak about the 8 million of us that are here, on the western coast of North America, representing one of the largest economies in the world. And when you do economic development, you realize that like bigger and collaborative is better. I mean, the statements that you can make when you think binationally is that there's almost nothing that you can't think of, manufacture, and distribute from our binational region anywhere in North America or around the world. If you were to say that just about one of the two cities, one of the two regions, you can't do that. So I think the wonderful thing for me is when I got here, already well established was the manufacturing discussion, and that's grown to advanced manufacturing. But I don't know if you've met the folks from Tijuana, Maritza Diaz, and the folks who have.
I've not.
Yeah, great person for you to interview at some point in time, because Maritza took that same model, but she and others knew that there was tech talent down there, software talent down there, and that CEDES and the universities were producing great talent. And they wanted to be able to say to companies, not only think of staying in the San Diego region because you can do your manufacturing south of the border, but if you're going to do a software center for excellence somewhere, don't put it in India, put it right down the road in Mexico. And she's been doing that for companies now. And big company names here in San Diego have continued to grow in the region because of that.
Well, I'd love for you to tee that up. We can talk about that offline. And I got to get back to something you talked about. It's near and dear to my heart, and it is my business partner's heart too. Charles Parisi is SDMAC. And since 2008, we did a program with them called, it wasn't called Mission San Diego. We sort of morphed to that. We did with Larry Blumberg, and Larry, as you know, started SDMAC, and then with Randy Bogle, and then of course, with Admiral, Balmert, and now with David Boone, and so forth. And I remember when we first started talking about we, as if I'm part of SDMAC, I was don't affiliate.
You definitely are.
The SDMAIS you mentioned earlier, the San Diego Military Economic Impact Study, and you got the numbers on this: $53 billion or more of indirect spending, and $34 billion of direct, or something like that. Talk about what that means to the EDC.
Oh, it is, no pun intended. Yeah. It's the anchor of the economy, right? We talk about, Dwayne Roth brilliantly laid out an argument that San Diego has three pillars. He called them traded economies. The pure economists used to get frustrated with that. But what Dwayne could do is he could tell the story that San Diego has an innovation economy, a military defense economy, and a tourism economy that the rest of the world would love one of those things.
That's right.
We have three of those things, and we don't project that way. And each of those industries, in its own way, produces great economic input and output for the region. But the military is, we think of the uniformed military, we think of the small businesses that have contracts with the military, you think of all the people driving on and off bases. What you miss is the number of businesses that have spun out in this region and stayed here because of the Navy. We have a cybersecurity industry in this region because of the Navy, largely because of NAVWAR.
Absolutely.
Qualcomm's first grant was Irwin's first dollars were Department of Defense dollars, and because of the region that he was operating in, one of the most brilliant men ever, maybe, but he was able to leverage that and turn that into a company that has just changed the way that we communicate. So the family tree in biocom and biotech in San Diego is really amazing, but the family tree around the military is probably not celebrated near as much. And being married to a veteran, it is one of the most special things about San Diego to me is sort of having that presence around all the time and feeling it in the community and in the economy.
Well, I'm sure Charles will chat with you about this, as we start re-engaging with SDMAC and offering a sort of an entrepreneurial SDMAC show. Charles' ideas, my business partner, has been an entrepreneur since age 25. And it's in his DNA. And obviously when we mentioned this to David Boone, he goes, all right, we're in, and we're going to chat about it. And obviously we would want to get you tied in on this. Listen, Mark, it's just always great to have you on. The wealth of information you share, it's the iceberg effect. We just talked about 10% of the 90% that's under there. And this, what can our listeners do to continue to support the great work that you folks are doing?
We get tremendous support from the business community in San Diego, and that allows us to do a lot of great work. If you are in the business community, we just love to talk to you and make sure that we're supporting you. Our team works day in and day out with businesses just to help them with any growth-related issues they may be having or any challenges they may be having. If you are if you're someone who's interested in learning more about how you can engage in some of the internship and school to work and education related items that we talked about, just reach out to us, because that is really going to be what makes San Diego's economy continue to shine and grow long into the future. And beyond that, just continue to contribute to telling people great stories about this region. That to me is what the richness of San Diego is. Not any one tagline that you can throw out there or any one way for people to look at the region, but really getting people here to know and understand that what makes it so special is the people who are here.
Right. And I think, and part of that, we're going to have you more on, or some of your team on, to continue these conversations. Is the work you do certainly ties into everything that people wouldn't necessarily think is business. And it is business. You working with the community college presidents and so forth. Always a delight to see you, Mark. Thank you for the great work you're doing, and the wonderful staff that I've known for quite a while. Just sort of, I'm done dating myself on this. And please come back and chat with us again in not too distant future.
I would love to. Thank you both for having me here today.
Absolutely. Mark Cafferty is the president and CEO of the San Diego Regional EDC. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest running community podcast. In our 18th year, brought to you by the fine folks at Mission Fed Credit Union for 6 decades, just doing terrific things. People living in San Diego County. Kristen Fogel, as always, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Co-host. Appreciate that. And we hope you enjoyed the interview.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.